Have you ever noticed this? The loudest voice in the room is rarely the wisest. The person who speaks the most is often the one who knows the least. And the one who sits in silence, calm, still, unreadable, that's the person everyone secretly watches. Because there's something powerful about not reacting, something unnerving, something untouchable. In a world where everyone scrambles to be heard, on stages, in arguments, in comment sections, you become dangerous when you don't compete for attention, when you don't raise your voice just to prove your worth, when you know who you are and don't need anyone to validate it. That kind of silence isn't weakness, it's strategy, it's emotional discipline, psychological control, philosophical mastery, and it rattles people more than any speech ever could. You see, the Stoics taught us this long before modern psychology caught up. They knew that restraint wasn't just about avoiding conflict, it was about building a fortress within. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." But today, most people speak twice as much as they think. They overshare, over-explain, and in doing so hand out the keys to their own emotional stability, to strangers, to critics, to manipulators. They leak their power, word by word, but not you, not anymore. Because today, you begin to master a different path, a quieter one, a stronger one, a path where silence becomes your armor, where stillness becomes your message. The modern world will try to provoke you, through gossip, through judgment, through confrontation. But when you no longer bite the bait, when your silence becomes intentional, they won't know how to reach you anymore. They'll wonder what you're thinking. They'll question their assumptions. They'll whisper behind your back because they can't read your face. And that's the point. When they raise their voice, you stay calm. When they attack your character, you respond with stillness. When they try to pull you into their chaos, you remain unmoved. Because your power no longer lies in being loud. It lies in being unreadable, unshakable, untouchable. This is the art of quiet dominance, of being seen without performing, of being respected without begging for it. In this video, we're going to dive deep into the philosophy, the psychology, and the ancient Stoic practice of strategic silence, and why it just might be the most powerful thing you never say. So take a breath, lean in, and discover what happens when you stop explaining yourself and let your silence do the talking. Part 1. Why we speak too much. The insecurity behind the noise. It starts with something so human, so deeply embedded in us, the need to be seen, to be heard, to prove that we matter. So we talk, we explain, we justify. We tell people what we do, what we've done, what we plan to do, hoping they'll see our worth in the story. We post online, we rehearse conversations in our heads. We drop facts about ourselves like breadcrumbs, leading people toward a version of us we hope they'll admire. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The more we try to convince others of our value with words, the less they tend to believe it, because validation that needs explanation rarely carries weight. In trying to impress, we often overexpose. We show our wounds too early, our fears too plainly, our strategies too loudly. We give people the playbook on how to misunderstand us, manipulate us, or worse, disarm us. In the rush to be known, we forget the value of mystery. We forget that silence isn't the absence of expression. It's a form of control, a boundary, a shield made not of words, but of restraint. Think of the workplace, the corporate battlefield, the loudest person in the room, often the most unsure. They speak in circles, dressing up insecurity and confidence, but the one who speaks sparingly, who pauses before answering, who lets silence settle without flinching. That's the one everyone turns toward when things get serious. Why? Because silence radiates certainty. It forces others to fill in the gaps with curiosity, not contempt. You see, in today's world, especially in America's hyperverbal culture, where networking is praised, where speaking up is seen as strength, choosing silence is rebellion. It's choosing self-possession over self-promotion. And that scares people. It unnerves them because they can't figure you out. They can't label you, box you, or push your buttons, because you haven't told them where the buttons are. When you speak too much, you hand over your emotional coordinates. But when you pause, observe, speak only when necessary, you become unreadable, unpredictable, untouchable. And ironically, that's when people start leaning in. That's when respect grows, not because you demanded it, but because you didn't. Seneca once wrote, "Speech is a mirror of the soul. If man speaks little, he must think much." And there it is. The deeper you go within, the less you feel the need to broadcast it. The strongest presence is often the one least explained. So ask yourself, are you speaking from confidence or from fear of not being seen? Are your words rooted in clarity or in the anxious need to be approved? Because you don't need to shout your worth. You just need to embody it. Let your silence be intentional. Let your actions whisper louder than your voice ever could. In a world drowning in noise, stillness becomes your edge. Part 2. Silence is a wise strategy. Silence is not emptiness. It's not absence. It's not weakness. Silence is a weapon. And the most disciplined warriors in life learn how to wield it with surgical precision. When you choose not to speak, you preserve the one thing no one can ever take back once given: leverage. Because the moment you speak, you reveal. You give away your thoughts. You show your emotions. You offer clues. But silence? Silence offers nothing. And that, in a world desperate for predictability, is power. People are uncomfortable with what they can't read. When you speak less, they have to fill in the blanks themselves. They guess, they assume, they project. And the more they guess, the more control you actually have. Let's say you're in a heated argument, maybe at work, maybe in a family gathering. Most people rush to respond. They raise their voice, defend their honor, explain every last detail. But the Stoic, the one with command over themselves, does something radically different. They don't react. They pause, they observe, and they choose silence not as surrender, but as strategy. You see, when you don't react, people lose their script. They expect a fight, they expect emotion, but instead they're met with calm. And that calm, it rattles them, because they can't figure out whether they've won or lost. In silence, you withhold your emotional currency. You refuse to let the world trade on your energy. And you remind people, subtly but firmly, that you don't owe them access to your mind. Let's take a real example. Imagine you're in a team meeting. Tensions are high. Someone challenges your idea in front of everyone. You could lash out. You could defend. You could talk endlessly trying to prove your point. Or you could breathe, lean back, let the silence speak louder than your rebuttal. Because in that moment, your lack of response tells them something stronger than any argument. I am not rattled. I am not reactive. And I don't play games I don't need to win. This isn't about being passive. It's about holding your position without announcing it. The greatest negotiators, leaders, and thinkers share this trait. They never say more than necessary. They don't explain themselves to people who haven't earned the right to understand. And they don't dilute their influence by speaking every time they feel discomfort. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are irritated by every rub, how will your mirror be polished?" Silence is the polish. And it's not just in big moments, it's in the everyday ones. It's in the moment you get that passive-aggressive email and choose not to reply until tomorrow. It's in the conversation where you could gossip, but choose not to contribute. It's in the text you could send, but don't, because you realize not every thought deserves an audience. Silence isn't the absence of communication. It's the highest form of it. It says, I know who I am. I don't need to prove it, and I won't be moved unless I choose to be. So if you want to reclaim your emotional space, your narrative, your presence, start by mastering your silence. Let others wrestle with their assumptions. Let them wonder why you didn't react. Let them question what you're thinking. While you calmly, quietly, keep building the life they can't quite define. Part 3. Silence is how you protect your mind and energy. There comes a point in life when you realize not every provocation deserves a response. Not every misunderstanding deserves an explanation. Not every attack requires a counterattack, because your mind is sacred ground, and not everyone should be allowed to walk across it with muddy boots. Silence in its truest form is not retreat. It's a filter, a force field, a conscious act of preservation. In a world where everyone is shouting, online, on the street, even inside their own heads, the rarest and most radical act is stillness. Stillness of speech, stillness of reaction, stillness of ego. You don't need to defend yourself at every turn. You don't need to convince people who've already decided what they want to believe. You don't need to spend precious emotional currency trying to make everyone understand your heart. Because here's the truth. Your peace is more valuable than their opinion. Every time you choose not to engage in petty arguments, every time you walk away from a pointless debate, every time you breathe instead of biting back, you're not backing down. You're rising above. You're protecting your energy. And in today's world, that is an act of strength. Think of your mental space like a garden. You don't let just anyone walk in and stomp around. You prune it, you water it, you guard it, because you know it's where your clarity grows, where your ideas are born, where your purpose takes root. Now picture this. You receive a snarky comment on social media. It's designed to provoke. It's laced with sarcasm. It's begging for attention. You pause, you read it, and then you choose not to reply. In that moment, you've won. Not just over them, but over your own impulse to need a response, because mastery over others starts with mastery over yourself. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But what if you didn't react at all? What if your silence became a boundary, a signal that says, "You don't get to enter my head unless I invite you"? There is incredible peace in not explaining yourself, in refusing to clarify rumors, in letting people sit with their own projections, while you sit with your truth. And in that peace, something powerful happens. You become focused. You get your time back. You protect your mornings, your evenings, your weekends from the noise that used to drain you. You reserve your energy for what matters, your craft, your mission, your relationships, your growth. The Stoics believe that tranquility comes not from controlling the world, but from controlling your response to it, and sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. So the next time you feel pulled to explain, to fight, to prove, pause. Ask yourself, is this worth disturbing my peace? Because when you learn to stay silent in the face of provocation, you teach the world something rare, that your energy is not up for auction, that your inner world is not a playground for outside chaos. Silence becomes not just your protection, but your declaration of power. Part 4. Silence makes people think more about you. There's a strange kind of power in the unknown. The colleague who doesn't overshare at meetings, the neighbor who smiles but says little, the man at the party who doesn't dance, doesn't shout, doesn't try to impress, yet somehow becomes the most interesting person in the room. Why? Because mystery invites projection. Silence forces others to fill in the blanks. And people are always guessing. When you speak less, they listen more. When you don't explain yourself, they wonder what you're really thinking. When you don't overreact, they replay their own words, doubting if they crossed a line. You become ungraspable. Not because you're hiding anything, but because you're not volunteering every detail of your life like it's a public blog post. That restraint, that quiet confidence, it creates a tension people can't resist. In psychology, it's called the pratfall effect. The less someone reveals, the more competent and admirable they appear, until they make a mistake or open up too much. Then the illusion breaks. But those who maintain a little distance, those who choose silence over compulsive self-reveal, they remain elevated, magnetic. Silence, when used with intention, becomes a form of social gravity. It pulls people in. It sharpens your edges. It keeps your image intact, because no one has seen enough to tear it down. There's a reason kings never explain themselves. There's a reason generals don't scream. There's a reason Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote pages of thought. but spoke few of them out loud. He didn't need to. He lived in alignment with his values. He knew the man who holds back his words holds more power than the one who shouts them. Now think about your own life. Every time you withhold that extra comment, that need to correct someone, that urge to impress, you preserve a little more of your presence. You give others a chance to wonder, what does he know that I don't? Why doesn't she react like the rest of us? What's going on in that mind? And in that wondering, they begin to respect you differently, not as someone trying to be noticed, but as someone who doesn't need to be. Here's a simple image to hold on to. At a wedding, two people jump on the dance floor, flailing with joy. One trips, the other is offbeat. Everyone laughs. But in the corner, one guest stays still. No dance, no spectacle. They leave without saying much, and for days after, people say, "Who was that?" There was something about them. That's the effect of silence. Not passivity, poise, not emptiness, depth. You don't need to hide who you are. Just stop offering it up to be judged. Be like a sealed envelope, clean on the outside, full of meaning on the inside, but opened only by those who've earned the right to read it. Because the less you reveal, the more people reflect. And in their reflection, your image grows sharper, not blurrier. So stay quiet, stay composed, let the silence do the speaking, and let the world try to figure you out. Part 5. Silent action speaks louder than words. In a world obsessed with noise, it is the quiet one who holds the most weight. We live in a culture where everyone is explaining themselves. On social media, at work, even in their own heads. Let me tell you who I am. Let me prove I'm right. Let me correct the record. But here's the truth. The person who has to say they are powerful usually isn't. The one who needs to be respected rarely is. And the loudest person in the room? Often the weakest. Stoicism teaches us something else, something sharper, something timeless. Don't talk about your values, live them. Don't respond to every provocation, walk past them. Don't explain your path, just keep walking. Because nothing confuses the insecure, the loud, the petty, more than someone who stays grounded in quiet discipline. You don't rise by fighting every opinion. You rise by becoming too focused to even notice them. Let them argue, let them gossip, let them try to provoke a reaction. You keep building, keep working, keep improving, and in time, your results become undeniable. Your consistency becomes your message, and your silence becomes your reputation. Let's look at the world around you. In every office, there's someone who talks big, promises big, but delivers little. Then there's that quiet colleague in the corner. Doesn't talk much, doesn't take credit, but somehow always gets things done. Guess who gets promoted? It's the same in life. When you stop performing for attention, people start paying attention. When you no longer need to prove anything, they start to wonder what it is you already know. And when you keep your mouth shut but your standards high, you create a kind of silent momentum that can't be stopped by criticism, gossip, or doubt. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." That's not just philosophy. That's the blueprint for every person who's ever built something real. Because actions whisper to the wise and shout to the world, but they never have to raise their voice. Think of a mountain. It doesn't move, it doesn't explain its height, it doesn't tremble when winds blow around it, it just is. And over time, the world shapes itself around that quiet presence. That's what happens when you act in silence. You no longer chase influence, you become influential. You don't force respect. You earn it through consistency, effort, and the quiet refusal to be shaken. Let them underestimate you. Let them wonder why you're not playing their game. Let them think you're not watching. Because while they're talking, you're building. While they're reacting, you're evolving. And while they're trying to prove a point, you're becoming the point. So the next time you're tempted to defend yourself, to explain your dream, to correct someone's perception, pause. And remember this, the most powerful people in history were not the loudest. They were the most disciplined. They didn't conquer with speeches, they conquered with steadfast silence and unwavering action. You don't need to shout, you don't need to post, you just need to keep going, keep becoming, because eventually the world will notice. And when it does, they won't ask why you didn't say more. They'll wonder how you stayed so focused while everyone else was making noise. We live in a time when everyone is trying to be heard, but few are actually saying anything worth listening to. A time when overexposure is mistaken for confidence and silence, often mistaken for weakness. But what if silence is the highest form of strength? What if staying quiet is not a lack of courage, but a sign of inner command? You see, in every conflict, in every misunderstanding, you are presented with two choices: to react or to remain rooted. And the deeper truth is this: you don't need to prove your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need to shout over noise to protect what's already clear in your heart. Because when you choose silence, you are choosing discipline over impulse, dignity over ego, self-respect over validation. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Not just to others, but to ourselves. In silence you hear your doubts, your fears, your truths, and only then can you tame them. In silence you realize what deserves your attention and what doesn't. In silence you stop performing and start becoming." So the question isn't, how do I get people to respect me? The real question is, how do I live in a way that commands respect, even when I say nothing at all? And the answer is simpler than it seems. You live with purpose, you act with clarity, you walk your path, firm, steady, focused, and you don't need to explain it. Because true presence speaks louder than explanation. And in time, people begin to feel it, not through your words, but through your energy, your decisions, your stillness. Let your silence be intentional. Let it come from confidence, not fear. Let it be the sanctuary where you gather your thoughts, fortify your emotions, and prepare your next bold move. This world doesn't need more noise, it needs more people who are grounded, focused, and strong enough to move quietly, but unmistakably. So if you want to change your life, start with less explanation and more action, less reaction and more reflection, less noise and more inner clarity. Don't confuse movement with progress. Don't confuse attention with value. And don't confuse volume with power. Let others speak of their greatness. You go and build it. Let others debate your character. You go and live it. And when they look for your weakness, let them find only silence. And in that silence, let them hear everything they need to know. Not because you told them, but because your life became the answer. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of this journey. If this video resonates with you, leave a like, share it with someone who needs some quiet time, and subscribe to join us every day. Each week, a profound Stoic reminder awaits you here, gentle, yet powerful enough to change the way you live. Be quiet, but strong, and never stop growing.